Good day, everyone. We're going to discuss to you about self-correction strategies. Why do we make use of self-correction strategies in the teaching and learning process? The purpose of implementing this is to provide students an independent practice activity that includes multiple response opportunities while also including a way for students to self-check their learning. So basically, it means that the students are the one responsible for checking their own learning. According to Bichner, Yang, and Cameron, 2005, self-correction is an indirect feedback where the teacher provides students with choices that would allow them to discern the correct form by themselves.
Another feature of self-correction is that it draws the students' conscious attention to their individual errors, which pushes them not to only notice their errors but to correct them. This in turn can be a good form of becoming aware of their most common errors and identify problem areas to resolve. So through self-correction, opportunities to realize errors and correcting these errors arises on the side of the students. For example, if a student have noticed himself to have difficulty in using the pronouns he or she, time comes that he gets confused with this issue and he will always make ways to correct himself. Next, self-correction is when learners correct themselves instead of a teacher doing it. Teachers can involve learners in self-correction to different degrees by giving learners more or less guidance as to the location and nature of their errors and examples of good use of language to compare their own to. So it can be more meaningful for the students if they were the one who discovered or noticed their errors and then corrected. It is not essential that most of the time the teacher will directly correct mistakes of the students. The help that a teacher can provide depends on the very need that a student might need. Giving students enough time to self-correct is an effective teaching technique. Another one, Fahimi and Brahimi 2005 also found that self-assessment instruction prepares students to plan and revise their texts as well as to evaluate the progress of their writing. The results make a case for instructing and involving students in self-correction practices with the objective of not only improving their writing but also their metacognitive skills. So when it comes to writing, self-correction allows students for a better revision of their text. This can be done in a higher level, like in the high school or in the college degree. It is very common in this level of learners to do self-correction in writing. In writing process, students may start from a draft and prepares for revision of his works through self-correction strategies. With this, they can improve their writing skills as well as their metacognitive skills.
Okay, another definition is that self-correction reminds that teachers should not always make the correction, but they should give chance to the learners to correct their mistakes by themselves. Okay, another thing, or additionally, Krashen in year 1982 makes a point that self-correction is different from or opposite of other corrections like peer corrections because self-correction is considered as indirect feedback wherein they will discern the correct and appropriate form by themselves. Unlike peer correction, wherein it is a direct feedback, where they will get directly the opinion and suggestion of their classmates. Next is process of self-correction. So in the classroom, learners can be helped to self-correct with various degrees of help. Number one is you may use a correction rubric for written homework, but this involves a lot of guidance and of course effort. But the simplest way to indicate that the learner commit mistake is by using facial expression. That shows that you are not yet satisfied with the answer. But always remember to do it in a very nice way that it will not embarrass the learner. Number two is Of course, time is always crucial, or giving enough time to self-correct, for them to self-correct, for it to become effective technique. Okay. Next is how to implement the strategy. Number one is to ensure that you identify the appropriate language skill for their practice. So you may use diagnostic activities for this or tests. Number two is include materials that are listed in critical components. So critical components are really helpful in developing learning in students. So because these critical components help us to be guided on what are really important. Number three is to model how to perform the language skill. Or, for example, one of the examples of self-correcting material is error log. So error log helps the students to monitor the kind and number of errors they commit. And so, they will become more aware of their mistakes that leads to self-improvement. So, in that, you should model first how to do it appropriately so that the students will be guided of what they should do.
Another way to implement the self-correction strategy is to ensure that students clearly understand how to use the self-correction material. So if as a teacher, we have to let our student understand how to use the self-correction material objectively. Then another thing is we have to be very sensitive when it comes to the difficulties of our learner. Like for example, particularly in the verbal or non-verbal response. Like for example, those students who have significant writing problems, then it is not appropriate for us teachers to require our students to have this self-correction strategy since it may cause frustrations on their part. Okay. Another way po is to um, monitor our learners who are using self-correcting materials. After monitoring them, we can have or we should give feedback about the appropriate or inappropriate use of self-correcting material. So it is not just enough if you're just going to give those correcting materials to your learner without giving them feedback afterwards. Another is to provide students with a way to record their responses. Example, the sheet of paper on which they record the responses. So have the learner record responses with a dry eraser marker on laminated response cards. So that is one of the examples on how to provide students with or how the way how the students should provide their responses. So next way to implement this is to evaluate our learners' responses by examining student response sheets. So self-correction sheets or are one of those self-correcting materials that we can provide to our learner. Then is to provide learners with corrective feedback regarding their performance as soon as possible. So um, as a teacher, we have to know first the difficulties of our learner for us to give objective feedback to them. Since, for example, we have identified them having this problem or difficulty in writing, so it is not appropriate for us to give them self-correction strategy in writing. Another is do not grade student performance using self-correcting materials. Grading performance will detract from the motivation. Self-correcting materials can elicit from students, and grading will inhibit students' willingness to take risks it is a crucial behavior for learning. So that is another way to implement the self-correction strategy.
How does this instructional strategy positively impact students who have learning problems? It provides students a way to practice a particular math skill a multiple number of times while receiving immediate feedback on their performance because they have access to the solution for each math skill prompt. It also provides students a risk-free environment to practice skills they have initially acquired through teacher instruction but for which they have not mastered. When students are willing to take risks, they will attempt more problems. The more problems they attempt, the more opportunities they provide themselves toward the mastery of the math learning task. Students can evaluate their performance privately without worrying about anyone else seeing them make mistakes, reducing their anxiety about doing math. It also provides modeling because students can review an accurate example of how to solve the particular math skill by referring to the problem-solving model that is provided. Immediate feedback helps them to recall specific problem-solving steps students may have failed to retrieve from memory. Immediate feedback also helps them to refocus on essential features of the particular problem-solving task they may have missed due to distractibility. The response record allows you to evaluate the student's performance. You can remodel, provide corrected feedback, and provide positive reinforcement as appropriate.